You may be seated. I was like, oh. Just to give an update for some of you who are new, my name is James Cho. For those of you who know, I've been away for a while, and I want to share a little bit about what's been going on in my life the past 3 weeks. It's been a huge challenge. Physically, oh my goodness, I was just talking. I've never gone through this in my life. Hives, and my son can attest to this. Some days I just sit there and it's sort of like, it starts just appearing all over, like one little spot, and then like the whole arm gets puffy and itchy like crazy, like no other. And I've never had this in my life. And it was like, the only time I could remember this was about 20 years ago. I was in Korea, and God was teaching me something, leading me down a new direction, and I ended up getting shingles. And that was another time where, you know, like, oh, it's similar but a little different, but like half your body gets all like, but that aside, you know, these are the times where I ask, okay, what does it mean to be heaven on earth? Because part of the reality of life, it's a struggle, it's a pain. You know, you're fighting continually. Not necessarily externally, you're not fighting with people, but internally, and you're engaging with different people of different perspectives. And as you know, what's your name again? Was it? Mackenzie. Mackenzie was sharing an international. The more international you get, the more you struggle. Because you have what you think is the right way to do things, and then you have to deal with everybody who thinks this is the right way, even though it's the opposite. So you have 10 people talking about what is the right way, but it's all different. And you try and put that all together. Even last night, I was talking with somebody about where God is leading to the next stage, and it's sort of amazing. But then sharing like, okay, how to be passionate about your vision, but also on the other side, how to listen. So God's teaching me, James, slow down your passion. I know I can be very passionate and very vocal. So okay, take that down 10 steps and learn, okay, how to slow down and listen. Slow down and listen. And today's message, this is a message for me as much as it is for all of you. And it's something I shared before, not to this audience, but to another audience. It's from 2 Chronicles chapters 35, verses 28 to 27. And can I have someone stand and read that for me? My eyes are not that good. Okay, thank you, Lillian. Yes, 35 verses 20 through 27. "35, 20 through 27. I love the U version of the Bible because my eyes are bad, so I just listen to it. My son and I, we just listen to the Bible continually. I encourage you guys to do that. That's a really good way to read the Bible. Yes. Megiddo. this is a very interesting story. And it's like, wow, this is not a fun story. Here's a king of Israel who gets killed in battle. And that's not a fun thing. And we'll talk about Josiah. Actually, Josiah is probably one of the best kings in all of Israel. And I chose a negative story of him, the way he died. Because I want us to see from his life what we can learn. And it's more, like I said, this is more self-reflection. It's interesting. I was meeting a lady back there, Sheila, who's in seminary. And once you're seminary trained, you go to seminary. And not only are you seminary trained, I teach at a seminary. So there's a lot of times there's a point where you can get to the point where I know you don't. Or it's not necessarily like a pride thing, but experience in life. Oh yeah, I've been through that. So you downplay what other people have gone through. And not living in the situation, the challenge of the situation itself. And it's easy to really say, oh, what's wrong with you? And the title of today's message is, Choose Your Battles Wisely. How do you choose your battles? And my problem is I don't choose my battles wisely. I from a young age, I've had a lot of energy, and so I used to fight everything. And I could share a story about my son this week. He did something, and he hit his head on the ground. He was going for something, and it reminded me when I was a little kid, what people said about me was, James, you're crazy. And part of me is, I am crazy. I will do things that no other people will. I used to. I'm older, so a little bit more mature, a little more wiser. But you fight the battles. But I think that's all of us to some degree, is that sometimes you say, we want this, something I want, and you fight this battle. And because I live in a home with deal with a lot of older people, when this past week I spoke in my dad's church, who is about 37 years old, just younger than this church. Boy, when you deal with people in their 70s and 80s, they all know the right way to do it. And they're more than willing to tell you. Or they won't tell you. Asian circles, they won't tell you. They'll do it behind your back, right? They won't say it up front, but they'll do it behind your back, and they'll be all happy and smile. But it's the challenge that you face, but we get to the point as we age, is that as through our whole experience in life, we want to fight our battles. We look at other people and we see someone who's opposing us in the way we go, and what do we think? We think that person is the enemy, right? You go, oh, you're opposing me. I think this is the right way. You don't think this is the right way. You're wrong. I'm right. So I must put you down. Or maybe not that. Now I'm more mature, so I don't put you down, but I find some way to get my way done. Right? Maybe through politics or something, interacting, and we try to do that. But God has really been teaching me is, no, James, that's your battles. That's not my battles. But what does it mean, as we look at the life of Josiah, what are the good battles to face? And I'll just talk about King Josiah. King Josiah is actually one of the most righteous kings in Israel. It starts off a little bit interesting. Let's go back to chapter 33, end of chapter 33. And we're talking about his dad. We're going to be very Asian, and it's very important. To talk about history is, where did he come from? And his dad was Ammon. And it says in verse 21, Ammon was 22 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem for 2 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, as his father Manasseh had done. Ammon worshipped and offered sacrifice to all the idols Manasseh had made. But unlike his father Manasseh, he did not humble himself before the Lord. Ammon increased his guilt. Verse 24. Ammon's official conspired against him and assassinated him in his palace. Then the people of the land killed all who had plotted against King Ammon, and they made Josiah his son king in his place. It's interesting. Just think about that. You have to think about this land. Who's the king? It's not just the king. They're a messenger of God. Many places that do that. But in 2 years to actually usurp him and kill him, that's a horrible thing. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord. And Josiah became king when he was 8 years old. Oh my goodness. I'm thinking, I have a son, 8. And even now, I still think about it. It's like, what would happen if I'm gone and my son doesn't have a father? When you get older, you'll start thinking about that when you're dad. You know, when you're young, you don't say verbally, but you think about it in your head. You continually think about it in your head. And okay, how would you raise him? And part of the reason is because my grandfather died when he was young. My mom died when she was 50. I'm 46 still. I'm 46 still. But I'm closing in on that 50. I'm like 3 more years. And in my life, my cousin, who was one of my favorite cousins, she died when she was like 45, 46. And then when you start thinking about that, it's like, wow, death can come by. And so like, oh, what would it be like? Without the direction. And I've seen many families where a son does not have their dad around. And the challenges that those kids face, especially when I go to Kenya and I work with an orphanage. And the need for good father figures. And here's Josiah, who did not have, well, we don't know if he had that. Actually, the role model he had was Ammon, his dad. Was he a good king? He was probably one of the most evil kings in Israel. Wow, that's amazing. And I'm thinking early on is people they want to do better, and there's reaction, but trying to work through that and trying to see what does it mean to be good and righteous in this time. And there's not much that's said, but it's amazing. In chapter 35, it says Josiah was 8 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 31 years. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord and followed the ways of his father David. I want to keep that. I'm a mathematician by training. So 31 years. Hold that in the back of your mind. How long did he reign over Israel? 31 years. So he was 8 years old when he began, right? When he died, he was 39. So much younger than me. Oh my goodness, I'm old. No, I'm young actually. I talked to someone who's in the center and go, yeah, you're still quite young. But 39 years old when he passed away. 8 years old, he becomes king. Then what happens? Read from verse 3. In the 8th year of his reign, while he was still young. So how old is he at this point? 16. Good, you guys, your math is great. 16. It's amazing what he did. He began to seek the Lord. This is a great time. What this is, think about that, is when you were 16, what were you doing? Yeah, some of you are just past 16, I know that. Some of you are not quite there. But nowadays it's a little bit younger. You start questioning your parents, right? You question about life, and then you're trying to set on your own path. And here's Josiah. At this point, at 16, he does not follow. He sees what his dad, he's probably heard all the stories about the evils his dad did and what happened to his dad, why his dad's not around. And as a king, with all the power of the kingdom, it's amazing that he says, I'm going to follow God. He began to seek God, the God of his father David. And it's amazing what he did was, he didn't start with his father. He goes, what is my family history? What is my family all about? Let me hear all the stories to go back. A lot of times when we're kids, what do we want to do? Yeah, I heard that story 1,000 times. We don't want to listen, right? We want to set our own way, but we don't want to listen to the past. But it's amazing here that he goes to the past and says, what is the right way? Let me find my history and try to actually engage that and go deeper. That's when he was 16. Later in that verse it says, in his 12th year he began to purge Judah and Jerusalem of high places, Asherah poles and idols. 21st century. Let's put away the things of this world and let's follow God. How do we put and focus our thoughts and minds on God? Think about it. He's 12th year, so he is 20, a young man now, starting to set his own direction. In the U.S., what do we say at 21? What happens between 18 and 21? 18, you have legal authority over yourself, and at 21 you could be the legal age to drink, right? That's what we said. Okay, you're a man now at 21. Here, think about it, at 20. He's starting to take authority, and what is he doing? He's purifying his country. He sees the wrongs that his country is doing and going, yes, I need to take this way. Let's put this way. Let's put this way. And that's at 20. And then let's look at verse 8. Go down to verse 8. In the 18th year of Josiah's reign, to purify the land and the temple, he sent Shaphan, son of Azaliah, and Maaseiah, the ruler of the city, with Joah, son of Joahaz, the reporter, to repair the temple of the Lord his God. He's 26 now. Starting to move along in what he's doing. He said, how do I put everything, how do I focus my one attention on God? How to give all that I am to God. And so in this way, you look at his life and go, wow, this is a wonderful guy. This guy really wants to serve God. And the next chapter, go on to the next chapter, he actually celebrates the Passover. And it's amazing in the celebration of the Passover, it was considered one of the biggest Passovers in the kingdom of Israel. I'm thinking, man, this is hundreds and hundreds of years. They sacrificed thousands of sheep and cattle to sacrifice to celebrate the Passover. He was willing to give everything that he had. So to the point where if we look at chapter 34:27, it says, because your heart was responsive and you humbled yourself before God when you heard when he spoke against this place and its people, and because you humbled yourself before me and tore your robes and wept in my presence, I have heard you, declares the Lord. Now I will gather you to your ancestors, and you'll be buried in peace. Your eyes will not see all the disaster I'm going to bring on this place and on those who live here. So they took his answer back. Is that because of his righteous life, he was not going to see the disasters that happened. If you know in the future, just a few years later with his son's reign, basically Israel is destroyed, Israel becomes no more, and all of Babylon takes over all of Israel. And it's no longer a place. And then later on in Nehemiah, Ezra and Nehemiah, you read about just how they wept and how at the time people remember the glory of that kingdom. And part of the reason why I share this is when I went back to my dad's church. It's 40 years old, and because of infighting, it was a church that was about 400. Because of the infighting and everything, guess what happened? It didn't split. There was usually about 10, 15, 20 people in the congregation. And in the people in the congregation, there are 20 people, and how many people are my age? One, a friend of mine from when I was back in high school, junior high school, who grew up in the church. And when I see her, I am so filled with joy, because through all the struggles, back then she was like, church, whatever. But now she goes, I know this guy. And I want to follow, no matter what happens. I know, because I know all her cousins, and they're so fed up with church, they just left, and they don't want to come back. And I've seen many people like that, and I don't blame them. But you see after struggle, you see the destruction and what happens afterwards. And what God said about Josiah is that he will not see this destruction. Same thing with my dad. He died before all the problems, all the breakups, all the fights within the church. But the key, if we look in this passage, is it says, because you humbled yourself before me and tore your robes and wept in my presence. Wow, to me, this is huge. How many of us are willing to humble ourselves before God? To weep in his presence, to tear our robes, to give up, to be just bare and say, God, I'm sorry. And this King Josiah, he did that. But I want to talk not about all his good stuff. But I want to talk about is chapter 35, verses 20 through 27, is how he died. How old is he then, now when he died? 39. So most of his life, you think about most of his life has been doing what? Devoted to God, changing Israel, trying to make Israel a better place. And at this point, where is his eyes? 39. Who is he fighting? Pharaoh Necho. None of us know who that is. Like, we know all the pharaohs, but who's Pharaoh Necho? But the key is, he's not fighting Israel. He's fighting Egypt. Not Israel, but Egypt. And this engagement with Pharaoh Necho, I think we can learn a lot just through this whole situation. Is that as we look at the situation, the question is, why is he fighting Pharaoh Necho? Well, it doesn't say. It never says in Scripture. In fact, this is the only time it's mentioned here. In 2 Kings, it doesn't talk about this at all. It just says he died in peace. It doesn't talk about this story. But as we look in the story of Pharaoh Necho, this interaction is amazing. Because something that Pharaoh Necho said, it just sort of hits me. I'm like, this doesn't make sense. And here's this. It says, after all this, when Josiah had set the temple in order, Necho, king of Egypt, went up to fight at Carchemish on the Euphrates, and Josiah marched out to meet him in battle. Okay, none of this makes it. But world history. Go back to world history. It was the Assyrian Empire that was in control. After the fall of the Assyrian Empire, what happened? The Babylonian Empire came about. And at this time, the ruler of the Babylonian emperor was Nebuchadnezzar, and his son was Nebuchadnezzar. So Nebuchadnezzar was fighting Assyria, and Assyria was on the downhill, going on the down, and then guess who they asked? Because they're not as strong with Babylonia, they call on a friend. They call on Egypt. Say, can you come support me? So who's fighting? Egypt and Assyria are joined together to fight Babylonia. My question is, why is Josiah involved? Why is Josiah involved? It goes back to my being, we fight the wrong battles. We fight the wrong battles. But this interaction with Necho is even more amazing. It's a little crazy. I stop and think about it. It doesn't make sense. Okay, who's following God? Josiah. Who's Pharaoh Necho? Egypt. So are they following God? No, they're not following God. It's the opposite. But if we look in this passage, look what Necho says in verse 21. But Necho sent messengers to him saying, what quarrel, king of Judah, between you and me? So Necho wasn't even thinking about Josiah at all. I don't know what Josiah had in mind, but it's interesting is it is not you I'm attacking at this time. Oh. Wait. At this time. Which means, hey, I may have you in mind for later. That's probably what Josiah was saying. Self-protection. Right? But the next verse, the next part of the verse, but the house with which I am war at, God has told me to. Who has told him? Okay, who's listening to God? Stop and think about this. Who's listening to God, devoted his life to God? Josiah. Who is like totally anti-God? Necho. But in this interchange, who's saying they heard God? Necho. And it doesn't say in this passage at all that Josiah heard God. It doesn't. Past experience doesn't mean anything. Whole life, your whole righteous life, that doesn't matter. At this moment, are you listening to God? It's not about your salvation. I'm not telling Josiah, forever remembered as one of the greatest kings, the most righteous kings, last righteous king in Israel. That's not going to change. But at that moment, in that decision he made, did he listen to God? It doesn't seem like it. He was only acting out of self-interests. And Necho said, I'm not going to say he heard God. He said he heard God. And that's important. So stop opposing God who is with me, or he will destroy you. Verse 22, Josiah, however, would not turn away from him, but disguised himself to engage himself in battle. And this is where I go back to politics. We think we're right because we have all these experiences, that we do whatever things we can. I know this is myself. I don't know about you. I mean, I work at the school, and church college, all over the place. It's easy to get into politics because you think you have the right way. And disguise yourself and try to do it because you want some way to affect the outcome. And that's what Josiah wanted to do. We know at the end he died. But I want to tell you what's not in this story that we know in history is what happened in that battle. What happened was Necho goes with the Syrian army, fights, and guess what happens? He loses. He loses in battle, and who wins? Nebuchadnezzar. And the Syrian army is no more. The empire is no more. Egypt slowly declines. Stop and think about this. Josiah was thinking out of self-interest to go up and fight Necho because he's worried about Necho attacking him. So he goes and tries to intervene. But the outcome, what happens to the outcome? God already knew the outcome. God already destroyed it. And the funny thing is, who heard God? Supposedly, Necho. This goes back to my seminary too. A lot of times when you go, oh, you heard God? Yeah, right, okay, I'm still going against you. Because I know what's right. But in the New Testament it says, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, I will repay. The Lord is my strength and my shield. I'm not my strength and my shield. Here's the thing about life, is that we as humans want to take control, and we want to fight, and we're taught to fight for it to make sure we get what what's coming to us, right? Especially in the U.S. Here we learn in Josiah is no. We need to submit to God. Let God take care of this. What do I need to do? What battles do I need to fight? That's the question I have for us today. What battles are you willing to fight? We see in the story of Josiah, actually, it's very important. For 31 years of his life, which battles is he fighting? He's fighting the battle for Israel's righteousness. He's not fighting outward battles. He's fighting inward battles. It's when he goes out and says, I want to defend myself, defend who I am, guess what happens? He's killed. I'm not saying that's going to happen every time, but I think there's a lesson we can learn. And I want to flip over to the New Testament. In 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 7 says, I have fought the good fight for faith. Fight the good fight. How do we fight the good fight? And what we look in Ephesians is, what is this fight against? Ephesians chapter 6 says, for our fight is not against flesh and blood, but against the principalities of the air. When we interact with people, man, it's easy to get fight with somebody and say, what's wrong with you? Right? Have you ever said that? What's wrong with that person? Why is that person that way? Why can't they think like me? Who are we fighting? Flesh and bones. We're trying to fight against them. Especially married, as your spouse, you try to work with it. What's wrong with them? Why don't they do it this way? And the whole marriage thing is learning how to give that up, right? It's like, oh. And the fight, what you realize, is not that. But the fight is internal. We cannot change our situation. I cannot change the fact that I have hives. Well, I can try. You try to eat healthy and so on and so forth. But beyond that, what is the battle that I face? What's the battles that you face? It's yourself, how you react to that person. How are you devoted yourself to God? And the whole book of Ephesians is talking about that. In Romans it says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. The fight is in the mind. Romans chapter 7 talks about Paul's battle. He's saying, I struggle with myself. O wicked man that I am, who shall free me from this body of sin and death? If we look in the 21st century, we look at Paul, who's the least wicked person we think of? Paul. But here is Paul in Romans saying, I am the wicked. Who shall free me from this? And the reason why is we see the battle is internal. How do we fight with our flesh? How do we understand? And that's why it says, put on the full armor of God. And it says in Ephesians, the first few chapters, for by grace we have been saved through faith, not of yourselves. But it's a gift of God. Chapter 1 is talking about all the great gifts of God. That we have everything, all the riches in heaven. It says, no understanding as we engage with people, that is that person, no matter how much they're coming against me and giving me pain and giving me grief, that's not the person I need to fight. In fact, it's the opposite, because it says in John 3:16, for God so loved the world. That means he loved that person. Yes? And it says it also, but God demonstrated his love for us in this, while we were yet sinners. Sinners is the same thing as saying, that person who's opposing me, That's who God loves. That's God's love. The person, not something who's not caring about me, the person who's opposing me and giving me grief. That is the person that God loves. And it says, while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. That when I was opposed to God, that God died for my sins. That is the love. So that person that you're fighting is not that person, that's flesh and blood. So how do we fight? How do we fight? If our fight is not against that person, where's our fight? This is what God's teaching me right now over and over. And each time, these times when I have these health conditions, really bad health conditions, it's pray. Ephesians chapter 3, that's what all Ephesians 3 is. He doesn't say, go do something. He didn't say, go fight the battles. He says, I pray that you will know the depth of God's riches. How wide, how long, how high and deep is God's love. Because once you understand God's love for yourself, what I've shared before is, once we understand God's love for us, nothing can oppose us. That person that's coming opposing, that's a fly. You know why? This is my prayer, even as I face obstacles. You know what? This is not my deal. Even if I fail, that's all good. Because it's not about my failure, it's about God's failure. God cannot fail. I've been sharing about my life. People, you guys ask me, I've been the PhD for how long? When I started the PhD program, I got to be honest with you, I thought I was going to fail. I knew I was going to fail. Because I know myself. I know how I like to read and study, but to sit down and write, I'm an engineer, mathematician. I'm not a writer. And to write like 150 pages, 200 pages, oh my goodness, that's like hell. But at the moment when I started my PhD program, I said, God, I think this is where you're leading me. You know what? Maybe I'm not fail. It's all good if I'm following you. And that once you understand that because of God's riches, his plan will never fail, I will never fail. And I confess to God, even if I fail, if I look stupid, all good to you. Father, you're going to teach me something. And you're going to grow. And it's not about the situation. It's about my battle and to get to know you better. And I got to admit, I'm almost done. Please, next month, I'm serious. I have to present this paper next month. And I'm like, at the end, I'm like, okay, write another video. But it's at that point where you go, Lord, thank you. I've learned so much about myself and how to actually sit down and trust you. Now it comes to you guys. What are you fighting? What are you struggling with? Who are you struggling with? Is it at work? That person at work that disagrees. I can tell you at my work, I won't say who it is, but this one person who controls a lot of strings, and he makes some crazy decisions. And they sent some emails to me. I'm like, you told me last time to send this email to you, and now you say do it a different way. And and they're like, okay, Lord, let that go. Let that go. What's the most important thing? Just keep on going, right? Maybe it's your spouse. At times you're like, why are they doing it that way? Oh no. Oh Lord, just thank you for where you're leading them, and see where their heart is following you. That's what I want to honor. Maybe it's at church. Why can our church be better like this or that? Oh, little different things. There's a lot of things. A lot of different things, but you can do, but say no. James chapter 4, it says, what causes fights and quarrels among you? Do they not come from your own desires that battle within you? You desire, but you do not have, so you kill. You covet what you cannot get, what you want, so you quarrel and fight. You do not have because you do not ask God. When you ask, you do not receive because you ask with the wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on what you get on your pleasures. And at the end it says, verse 10, humble yourselves before the Lord, and He will lift you up. So, brothers and sisters, as you think about your own personal battles, are you coming from a point of pride? Are you coming from a point of humility? And I know most of this group is young, but it doesn't. I see that even when young, even when you're 7, you look at a 2-year-old. Oh, look how young they are. That sense of pride or age is always there. They're saying, no, I'm willing to give that up. Let me listen. Let me sit down and listen because I don't need to defend myself. God is my defender. And everything I struggle with in life, they're not struggles. Yeah, they're struggles that we have to push through. So the deeper struggle is, Lord, how am I getting to know you more and more through these struggles? And how am I learning how to hear your voice better? And how am I hearing, as Paul says, the depth of your love for me? So even that song we sang earlier, you know what? You forgave my sins of the past. You forgave the sins of my present. And you forgive the sins of my future. And through all that, you still love me. And you say, I can be here right now. So as we pray, I just want to have you reflect on your lives. What are the things you struggle with? And say, Lord, how can we give this up to you? And just receive the riches of God. Just receive right now. Receive His goodness, receive His presence, receive His voice that says, I love you, and no matter what you're going through, I am with you. You just need to humble yourself before me and trust that I will lift you up. Father God, I just thank you for today. I just thank you for your word, the story of King Josiah. Just what a wonderful king. But also the struggle that he has is the same human struggles that each one of us have. We often want to fight the battles outside of us. We want to fight for our protection and not fight the battle in our hearts that need to be purified to really devote the next step to you. We want to show ourselves as righteous instead of being clothed in your righteousness. Lord, clothe us in your righteousness, in your presence each moment of each day. I pray all these things in your precious name.